Hare Rama Hare Krishna. We have a very special speaker here today, all the way from Russia. His Holiness Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Let's give him a big Haribol. Maharaj is no stranger. He has been here. He has been to America multiple times, and last time I met him here in Laguna Beach was 2007, I believe. And Maharaj has visited California even before. So as I said, he is no stranger. But if you don't know Maharaj, then you can always Google him. But just briefly, just for my own clarification, Maharaj has a PhD in molecular biology. And while he was studying, he got inspired by the writings of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And Maharaj on Thursday was speaking to some audience in San Diego, and that's called Krishna Lounge. Most of them are new devotees. And Bhaktivinoda Maharaj, who is our GBC, he introduced Maharaj there. I wasn't there, I heard that lecture. And so Maharaj was talking about how KGB back in the day troubled Maharaj, and they wanted to basically get more out of him about ISKCON so they could, kind of torture other devotees as well. And Maharaj said in this lecture that it wasn't primarily the KGB that inspired him or that kind of drove him towards ISKCON, but it was primarily the rationale that he found in the Bhagavad Gita. He said, generally, when you talk about religion, it is faith-based. You have to believe it. You don't believe it, you are liberated, and you don't believe, then you are doomed, kind of thing. He said when he read Bhagavad Gita, he found that to be written in such a rational manner that he was really kind of inspired, and he basically gave his life to this mission. Maharaj has written many books in Russian. Maharaj is an initiating guru, which means that he is accepting disciples. And we have one aspiring disciple right here in this audience. I don't want to name him yet, but there might be others as well that I'm not aware of. So without further ado, I will turn it over to His Holiness Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Let's give him another round of applause.
Нужна? Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namashrishtam Manumapi Sachiputramatra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajamurupurim Madhurim Goshtavatim Radhakunda Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Prathita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Yantah Pravishya Mama Vachimimam Prasuttam Sanjivayata Kila Shakti Darah Swadhamna Anyamsya Hasta Charana Shravana Tvagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Svasyasta Vishwasya Kalah Prasidatam Dayanta Bhutani Shivam Nithodhiyamanascha Badram Vajatata Doksha Jayaveshyatam No Matirapya Haituki. So, good evening to everyone. I'm very honored to speak in front of all of you. And I was asked to speak tonight a little bit about one of our glorious spiritual masters, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura Prabhupada, whose disappearance day we are celebrating today. It's a very deeply rooted and important tradition to remember great personalities who contributed to our well-being. What we are doing today would not be possible without their sacrifice, without their earnest endeavor to give us some meaning in life. And in one sense, it's easier for us to do all these activities, but it's only easy because they did so much to facilitate us doing this. Sometimes we don't understand. We sometimes take it for granted. Somewhere in the, south corner of California, People are gathering and chanting Hare Krishna. Yeah, so what? Not a big deal. But even 100 years back, it would not be even imaginable that this would happen. And we're doing it in a very natural way, as if it is something which we deserve to do. But in reality, there is a lot of hidden work which laid the foundation of what we are doing, which in reality facilitates us in many, many respects we are unconscious of. It is said that if you are on the shoulders of a giant, it's very easy for you to see the horizon. We are very small living entities, not very significant living entities. And we are generally bewildered, as many people, confused, as many people in Kali Yuga. So many ideas are floating around, so many propaganda, so much propaganda is going on, and everyone is pulling this direction, that direction. But there are great personalities who are coming here in this world and sacrificing their life, their energy, and their intelligence for us to easily climb on their shoulders and see the reality. This is not a small thing, to speak the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, to practice Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is, objectively speaking, I'm not speaking like a sectarian member of a sect. Any sect, of course, glorifies themselves. But objectively speaking, this concept of Krishna as God is the most amazing theology which is there. The most amazing. And the most amazing philosophies behind this practice. And we are taking it in a very natural way. Why? Because some great personalities dedicated their life to give us this chance. And definitely Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada is one of these personalities. He was born in the late 19th century, in 1874, in Jagannath Puri. And there was an old prediction in Padma Purana that in Jagannath Puri, all the Vaishnava Sampradayas will come and make a confluence. They will merge together, and from Jagannath Puri, they will spill out the borders of India and actually overflood the whole world with these ideas and with this movement. So he was born at the request of his father. His father, again, glorious teacher and glorious spiritual master Bhaktivinoda Thakur, had 13 children. Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada was the sixth of them. And his father, his whole life mission was to fulfill the prediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whom we see on the altar, that his holy name will spread all over the world. Prithivita achayata nagaradigram sarvatra prachara hoy bimoranam. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said this in a very definite terms, that my name will be heard all over the place. But who heard the name of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu outside of India? Very few people, maybe some scholars, perhaps, not probably even then. And who really appreciated what he gave. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his life's mission was to ponder over how to make the teachings of Lord Chaitanya accessible, how to really touch the heart of us rational people. As Rupanuga Prabhu mentioned, that I was really impressed by the rational presentation of irrational things. You know, believing God is totally irrational because, you know, the intelligence cannot really penetrate the mystery of God. Nevertheless, the rational presentation is possible, and in 19th century, you know, at that time, India was ruled by Britishers. It's now Britain is ruled by an Indian, but at that time the situation was vice versa. So, and Kipling, the famous writer, he wrote that this is the burden of white people to civilize this tribal people who live in India. It's a burden, it's a duty. So Britishers, they viewed himself as the people of superior culture, who are bringing this superior culture to this indigenous people in India. And as a result of this intellectual aggression, it was not only economical aggression, it was not only political aggression, there was a very strong intellectual aggression at that time. As a response to this intellectual aggression, there were a few movements which appeared at that time, specifically in Bengal. Arya Samaj, Brahma Samaj, and Ramakrishna Mission. And they all were trying to present Hinduism in a very rational terms. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a part of this intelligentsia of Bengal, but his way of thinking was completely different. Because all these people, Arya Samaj, Brahma Samaj, Ramakrishna Mission, they had an idea that the only impersonal concept of God can be accessible to all people. To unite all people, as soon as you start speaking about some personal God, there will be some quarrels. My personal God is better than your personal God, and you know, people will start quarreling, and they will never be in peace. So their idea of unification of religion or of giving people some universal truths was, let's make him impersonal. Let's preach this impersonal concept. God is something which is really nothing. But, you know, because he is nothing, it's not so painful for you to accept him. So that's basically the idea. To accept personal God is very difficult because personal God means you have to surrender, and who wants to surrender? Nobody wants to surrender. But if God is impersonal, why you have to surrender to, you know, there is nobody to surrender to because it's just impersonal nothing. So that was their idea, the notion of theological concept which could be universal and could be rationally presented, and they were trying their best, not without a success. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he knew that something is essentially false in this idea. That because ultimately God is person. Impersonal nothing cannot have desire, and without a desire, without a plan, without a design, this beautiful, huge, amazing material creation would not take place. Why? Why impersonal nothing would create personal something? What is the reason for this? What is the cause? What is the purpose of this creation? You know, and ultimately, if you say that the cause of everything which we see is impersonal, it basically means that whatever we see around us is still meaningless. And ultimately, your personality is meaningless. So this idea is not really appealing to the human soul. You know, if you are really frustrated with this material world and somebody will say, just become nothing, you may like this idea. But if you are not completely, utterly frustrated, then this idea is not really appealing, you know. Why should we want something like this? So his idea was, let's present the true philosophy of Hinduism, which is at the core of it is personal. Because the most ardent desire of every human being, of every soul, not human being, every soul, is desire for love. And love is by nature very personal. You cannot love something impersonal. So to love something, to manifest your love, you have to be person, and somebody whom you want to love also has to be person. Not only person, the most attractive person, most beautiful person, most wonderful person. Person, just by thinking about whom, you will forget everything else. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wanted to present, and he was writing books, and he was dreaming about the day when people from all over the world would come to India and would take mridangas and karatals and will start chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Exactly what we are doing now. But at that time, it was just a dream. Nobody could imagine that it's possible. So, as you perhaps know, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a magistrate, and he was living, he was a highly placed British officer in the administration, and he was placed in Jagannath Puri. And his constant meditation was about this, how to give people the Krishna consciousness, how to give people Krishna, the understanding that ultimately God is the most beautiful person, most attractive person. And while he was living in Puri, at one point, Jagannath Dev, the presiding deity of Puri, the Lord of the universe, Lord Jagannath came to him in dream. And Lord Jagannath smiled at him. Of course, Lord Jagannath always smiles. There is never time when he doesn't smile. But he particularly smiled at Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his dream, and he said, so you should establish this Siddhanta and you should spread it all over the world. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, I have been trying. It's not so easy, and I'm not so young anymore. And I need help. And in this dialogue, in his dream, Bhaktivinoda Thakur challenged Lord Jagannath. If you want me to establish this, you should help me, and you should send me somebody from your personal entourage. You should send to me some person who is empowered by you, and by empowering him, I will be able to do what you asked me to do. And then Jagannath in his dream said to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you go to Bimala Devi and you pray to Bimala Devi. In Jagannath Mandir, in Jagannath Puri, there are many, many temples. Lord Jagannath is there in the main altar, but there are many, many different temples. And one of the most prominent temples within the premises of Jagannath temple is the temple of Bimala Devi. The peculiar custom which is there in Jagannath Puri is that first prasadam is offered to Lord Jagannath, and after Lord Jagannath accepts this, bhoga becomes prasadam. But then the prasadam is taken to Bimala Devi. And when Bimala Devi accepts the prasadam, then the prasadam becomes Mahaprasadam. When it's just taken by Lord himself, it's just prasad. But when it's taken by Lord's trusted servant, it becomes Mahaprasad. And this Mahaprasad is spread to everyone else. We all know that Jagannath Puri is the place which is famous for Mahaprasad, and Mahaprasad has very special mystical qualities from Jagannath Puri. So, and it's very purifying. So the idea, it's very interesting. The idea is that the prasadam of Lord Jagannath accepts accepts very special quality only after it is taken by Bimala Devi, and then after that it's spread all over the world. So when Lord Jagannath told Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his dream, you go to Bimala Devi and pray to her and she will fulfill your desire. Actually, the hidden implication behind this order is that you go to Bimala Devi, you get her mercy. I'm giving you my mercy, this is prasad. You go to Bimala Devi, you turn my mercy, my prasad, into Mahaprasad. And then by her mercy, doubled or coupled with my mercy, somebody who will come to you as a result of this will spread this Krishna consciousness all over the world. So what happened, sometime after that, wife of Bhaktivinoda Thakur became pregnant, and after some time she gave a birth to a child, and this child was called Bimala Prasad, because by the mercy of Bimala Devi, he was obtained. He was actually, he came to this world. And he was a very special child. Still, there is a photograph of a little Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and he has such a, he has such a big head, really huge head with forehead coming like this, because the brain substance doesn't really fit into the skull, so it's just coming out. So, and when he was born, the umbilical cord was around his waist, and actually the trace of this umbilical cord was the whole life in Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, like Brahmin's thread. So he was born with this very special sign. And he was born in February sometime, and after 5 months, Jagannath Rathayatra started. And when Rathayatra started, the cart of Lord Jagannath stopped at the house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is a very mysterious thing. Not every time, but every now and then, the parade, which is supposed to be, very scheduled and orderly, with all these carts traveling from Big Mandir to Gundicha Mandir, couple of miles, stop somewhere, and nobody is able to move this cart. Because it is said in Jagannath Puri that the cart of Lord Jagannath is moving not because people are pulling the ropes of the cart. Sometimes we're proudly thinking, I am pulling the Lord of the universe. Please think about this. Isn't it a ridiculous proposition that you are capable to carry the Lord of the universe? He is heavier than the universe itself because he is the source of the universe. So it is said in Jagannath Puri that the cart of Lord Jagannath is moving only because of the will of Lord Jagannath. And when Lord Jagannath doesn't want the cart to move, the cart stops. So in this particular occasion, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was born, the cart stopped and stand still for 3 days. And nobody was able to really pull it, there was a lot of endeavors, and ultimately Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he ordered that big Sankirtan party would come and people would chant very loudly, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Didn't help. Nothing could help. This cart was standing there without moving an inch. And ultimately, Bhaktivinoda Thakur told his wife, why don't you bring little baby, because Lord Jagannath is standing just in front of our house, maybe there is some idea behind this. So she brought a little baby, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was 5 months old at that time, and placed the baby on the cart in front of Lord Jagannath. And immediately when she placed the baby, the garland of Lord Jagannath broke and fell exactly on this little baby, which is the sign of blessing. Again, Lord Jagannath showed a very special blessing to this little child. And at the moment it happened, the cart started moving. Lord Jagannath wanted to give this blessing to this little child, and he did this. And after that, his mission was fulfilled, so he went further along the road to Gundicha Mandir. So that was the beginning of Bhaktisiddhanta's life, and of course I don't have much time to describe his amazing life in all details. He was a genius person. He started chanting Hare Krishna mantra vigorously. He actually requested his father to bring him chanting beads, and his father gave him chanting beads when he was 6 years old. From 6 years old, he was chanting constantly. He was taking a lot of pleasure, and he really was, and he was extremely serious. He was not a playful child. He was very serious. He was always doing something. At that time, his father gave him Shalagram Shila, which he found in the foundation of their house, and initiated him into worship of Shalagram. So from the very early age, little Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati started worshipping the Lord. And he studied in English school, and then he studied Sanskrit, studied Bengali literature, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he became, in the college, he studied Jyotish, and he became a great astrologer. That's actually why he was called Sarasvati. He was called Siddhanta Saraswati because he translated Surya Siddhanta when he was, this title was given to him when he was a child of 15 years old. And this title was given to him by his professor of astrology or of astronomy because he translated this Sanskrit treatise from Sanskrit into Bengali, which was almost forgotten. This astronomical treatise, Surya Siddhanta, was translated by him, and because of this he was given this title, Siddhanta Saraswati. Siddhanta is a genre of Jyotish literature which describes the astronomy as we see, the structure of the universe as we see it. Anyway, he became a great astrologer. He was, and actually an astrologer who studied his chart. He was very impressed by the chart of this special child, and he said that this sadhu will be very prominent all over the world. So, and then after some time he gave up this astrology as being a useless pursuit, and he dedicated himself completely to the spirituality. One thing which I wanted to tell a little bit about his, I started my little story or little narration about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati from saying that in what we are doing, we should really try to understand the input of other people who facilitated us doing what we are doing now. We shouldn't really take it for granted. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur liked him very much. He really distinguished him from his other children, but of course, other children had their missions. But he was his pet child, and specifically he knew that this child of him, this son of him, will play a very significant role in this mission of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. But before spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, by the way, you need to have Krishna consciousness yourself. Because how you can spread something which you don't have? Sometimes we are very eagerly trying to spread Krishna consciousness, forgetting this point, that to spread something you need to have it. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, having this idea in mind and having this mission in mind, he underwent a very severe practice of chanting 1 billion holy names. 1 billion holy names, it took him 9 years and 4 months to chant 1 billion holy names, while he was chanting every day more than 192 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We are sweating and struggling to chant 16 rounds. And we consider us great sadhus because we are doing it sometimes. He was chanting more than 192 rounds every day for 9 years, doing all other things as well, but for 9 years and 4 months, he was chanting it on the chanting beats of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, on which Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself fulfilled this vow of chanting 1 billion names of God. Yesterday I was speaking with one devotee who told me how he came to Krishna consciousness. He said, I was a child of maybe 12 years old or 10 years old, and he was sent to Boy Scout camp. It was in Russia, so it was something like Boy Scout camp. And in this Boy Scout camp, he said there was one young girl who was some sort of a teacher there. And he said, I was very much attracted to her. She had special glow around her, and she was really pure, and I was very much attracted. And I saw that she had these chanting beats. And I asked her, what you're doing? She said, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. And she said to him the mantra. He was a small boy, he didn't hear anything about this. She said, I am chanting this Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. He said, really? Why are you chanting this? She explained that this is such a prayer, and this is nice, and this and that. And she said, so the boy asked, how many times you chant this? She said, well, I chanted 108 times. He said, really, 108 times? It's not possible. No, it's not possible. You cannot do this. No, she said, no, I'm not chanting it 108 times. I'm chanting it 16 times by 108 times. He said, no, you must be kidding me. You're a cheater. It's not possible. For people who are not really used to meditation, who don't know what meditation is, it's very difficult to imagine that somebody can sit and just chant again and again and again. I remember when I was in Soviet Union and there was a huge propaganda against Krishna consciousness movement. I remember one article was there in a newspaper. These Hare Krishnas, they're so crazy people, they're so completely insane people, and they chant this Hare Krishna mantra 1,728 times a day. And I remember reading this. I was a devotee at that time, and I imagined how people would take it, They will be probably fainting, 1,728 times. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So what I mean to say is that it's very difficult for people to relate to this sort of practice because they don't really, their mind is not trained in meditation. And for us, okay, fine, we're chanting this 1,728 times Hare Krishna, maybe some of us. But he was chanting it, more than 10 times more. Why? How? Because he knows the secret. And he wants, really serious, because he wants that Hare Krishna mantra would go into his blood. Would not be just in his lips. When we chant Hare Krishna mantra, it's in our lips, sometimes on our tongue. Very rarely it's in the heart. But Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati wanted to have this Hare Krishna mantra penetrating his body. There was another story of one disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. He was very old and he was always chanting. And once he became sick, and some Ayurvedic doctor was called to him, to his bed, to check out what's happening to him. And as you know, Ayurvedic doctors, they're supposed to take your pulse. And by reading your pulse, they can understand what's wrong with you, what is the disease, what is the imbalance of Vata, Kapha, Pitta, all these three doshas. So this Ayurvedic Kaviraj came to his bed and started taking his pulse. And for a long time, he was trying to take this pulse. And then the people around him, they asked, so what is with him? What is wrong? He said, I was trying to read to find out what's wrong with his Kapha, Vata and Pitta. But the only thing which I heard in his pulse was Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. There was no Vata, there was no Kapha, there was no Pitta. There was only Hare Krishna in his blood. Because when you bring your whole being, your whole soul in harmony with the sound, which is not different from God himself, then miraculous things may happen. You become one with God, but not in a gross sense, not in a sense as Mayavadis say, but you become one in intention with God, one in mission with God, one in power with God. The God will start acting through you, and the whole power of the spiritual kingdom will be going through you by this process of harmonizing your individual consciousness with the super consciousness of God. So that's exactly what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada was doing during these 9 years and 4 months of his vow, when he was constantly chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, with this idea that people of the world should know the power of this mantra. That people of the world should really understand and get the sense how important it is to chant this mantra. And while doing this, he was eating only once a day and eating it very austerely. He was cooking himself. He was only eating rice, sometimes using little pepper, not even using salt. For 9 years, he was keeping these severe austerities with us in mind. To really give us with this idea that we should really get this. And that's why we can do it. That's the reason why we can do it. So yes, and then so many other things happened. He established his mission, Gaudiya Math, and he started doing this in his Gaudiya Math. He got initiated by Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji. He was very loyal disciple, but in a very peculiar way. He actually was a great revolutionary. It's a pleasure to talk about him because religion, when it becomes established, it gradually loses its revolutionary power. The real religion is always a revolution against the establishment of this world. Actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura Prabhupada himself said that the only traditional religion of this world is an atheism. If anything is being traditionally passed down generation after generation, is this notion of atheism. And we know every religion, after it becomes established, it gradually loses its revolutionary spiritual power and becomes just a part of this material establishment. And to speak about him is important for us because it's so easy for us also become very traditional Hare Krishna devotees in Laguna Beach. Old people are coming to the temple and saying Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But actually, spirituality is the revolution against this material world. It's rebellion against the customs of this material world. The material world is pushing us in a certain direction. And spirituality means we're reversing this flow. We're trying to go against the flow of material nature. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada, his life is the vivid and the most important example of this rebellion against all the superstitions of the world. What happens with the religion or with spiritual movement, it comes afresh and usually some powerful person brings it to this material world, but then it becomes just a bunch of superstitions. People just doing it because their fathers were doing it, and grandfathers were doing it, and grandfathers were doing this, and they don't know why they're doing this, but they're still doing this because this is the way we should live. But no, everyone has to discover, first of all, this urge to be with God, which is there within our soul, which is there innate to our nature, and everyone has not only to discover it, but also to express it through a meaningful, sadhanas, through very meaningful practice, which tangibly will bring you closer to God, which bring you the real spiritual experience. The religion is not to come on Sunday, and just put some little money in the hundi and go home and watch TV. This is not the purpose. The purpose is to get tangible spiritual experience. The purpose is not just to believe. The purpose is to see. Therefore, religion is called, or spiritual philosophy in India is called darshan. Darshan means seeing. Darshan means the way to see. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada, he was giving us this revolutionary experience, and as his followers were proudly saying that he started the rebellion against all the established customs of the world, against all the established religions. He was a fierce fighter. And to preach the truth, which is uncomfortable, Actually, spiritual truth is very uncomfortable. It really deprives you, the comforts of, peaceful life in this material world. Because it says to you, do something. You really have to do something. Please don't become nothing. Realize your potential, your spiritual power and your spiritual nature to the fullest extent. So he was this revolutionary, making the rebellion against so many people, and these people, they were against him. So many people were opposed to him, but he was saying uncompromising truth, which is difficult, because again, we know that we have to be politically correct. We have to say something which is politically correct all the time, and we have to be very mindful and conscious that God save of saying something which is politically incorrect. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was somebody who was saying only politically incorrect things. He was saying things which nobody liked. But nevertheless, he was saying this because he knew that only when we will become uncompromised with the truth, we can really touch the hearts of people. And so many people were touched. One little example from his life, which is very, perhaps, interesting. Once he was asked to speak in front of children. And when you speak, when you have this difficult task to speak in front of children, you try to say something and you don't really know what to say. So there were little children, maybe 10-year-old children in school. So he asked them the question, what do you think is better, to water Tulasi or to water eggplant? Why did he ask this question? Because at that time in Bengal, Vivekananda was very famous. Vivekananda is a very famous Indian preacher and saint who came in Chicago in 1893. And one of his very famous sayings, of Vivekananda's sayings, was that, Tulasi is the holy plant. And it's, from the practical point of view, it's completely useless. You cannot really you cannot even make the, salad of Tulasi leaves. It would not be very palatable. At best you can eat one Tulasi leaf or something like this. So Vivekananda, in his rage or in his, enthusiasm to preach practical, quote-unquote, spirituality, he said it's better to plant eggplant or to water eggplant than to water Tulasi, because at least you can eat eggplants and you cannot eat Tulasi. And he is famous also saying that it's better to play football than to read Bhagavad Gita, by the way. So that's the level of his thinking. He said, you become closer to God by playing football than by reading Bhagavad Gita. You still wonder how you can become closer to God by playing football. You must be really Vivekananda to figure it out, how this sort of activity can bring you closer to God. So anyway, so he asked these little children, what do you think is better, to water Tulasi or to water eggplants? And because these little children were very politically correct and astute and quite, probably knowing these fashionable, spiritual innovations by Swami Vivekananda, very enthusiastically, all these children yelled in response, eggplant is better, eggplant is better. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada said, why you think watering eggplant is better? And the children again very enthusiastically responded, it's better to water eggplant because eggplant has fruits. And Tulasi doesn't have any fruits. So it's better to water eggplants because you can ripe the fruits, you can get the fruits from it. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, by listening this answer, he said, you know, if you want to go back to Godhead, you should be fruitless. You should relinquish your fruitive mentality, because by being attached to the fruits of your action, you will never be able to get to the spiritual world. This is the lesson number 1 in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, don't be attached to the fruits of your work. So when he started saying this, that Tulasi is much better because it doesn't have fruits. It doesn't give you fruits, but by watering Tulasi, you can exercise your selfless mentality, which is also there. By serving Tulasi, you can exercise your inclination to serve without expectations the fruits. Our problem in this material world is that we always expect the return. We always expect rewards for whatever we are doing, the fruits of whatever we are doing, and therefore we remain in this material world. And we get all these meager fruits of this material world, but we don't get the greater reward, which you can only get if you relinquish this mentality of always expecting some rewards. And he said, if you water the Tulasi, you will water your inclination within your heart to serve without any expectation of the fruits. And when you water this, when you strengthen this seva-vritti, the inclination to serve, then Srimati Radharani will meet you, because she is this original energy of the Supreme Lord, who is ultimately rewarding you with the most important reward you can ever imagine, love of God. And she will let you to the spiritual world. So that's his preaching to the children in Bengal at that time. You know, this is just little sample of how he was preaching, trying to at the same time defeat other ideas and other notions. So many other ideas and other understandings which are ultimately detrimental to our spiritual development. And perhaps the last thing which I will say, because I'm already speaking too long, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura Prabhupada was always saying that, yeah, two things I will say, if you don't mind. He was very loyal disciple of his Guru Maharaj. And his Guru Maharaj, Barakishore Das Babaji, and he was very respectful to him. And his Guru Maharaj gave him 3 instructions. One instruction, never to accept any disciples. Second instruction, never associate with other worldly minded people. And the third instruction, never to go to Calcutta. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura Prabhupada accepted thousands of disciples, associated with all kinds of people, including the governors of Bengal and the Englishmen, Britishes, and whatnot. And he established the most glorious temple in Calcutta. So you can ask, how is it that he was a loyal disciple? He got 3 instructions from his Guru Maharaj, and he did exactly the opposite. He basically broke all these instructions. And he himself explained this. And that's again why I'm saying this, because it reveals his revolutionary nature. He said, I followed instructions of my Guru Maharaj meticulously to the letter of what he said. Listen how. That was his explanation. He said, his first instruction was not to accept disciples. I never accepted my disciples. Whoever I accepted as disciples, I actually accepted as my gurus. Because by accepting them as disciples, I was always admiring their service, their eagerness to serve, and I always considered them as my gurus, and I never considered them as a disciple. I don't have any one disciple, but I have so many masters and so many gurus around me. That's, that's the instruction number one. Instruction number two, you should never associate with anyone with worldly-minded people. He said, I never associated with worldly-minded people. Because associating with worldly-minded people means that you accept something from the worldly-minded people, that you depend from the worldly-minded people. If you just, giving them something, you're not associating with them. You're there to give. So I never associated with any worldly-minded people because I never depended on them to give me something. And then he said, yes, I established this temple in Calcutta, but I never went to Calcutta because I only went to my temple, and my temple is not Calcutta, it's Vaikuntha, so I never went to Calcutta. I went directly to Vaikuntha from Mayapur. So, he was not an ordinary person. He was fulfilling the desire, but he knew the essence of this desire of his Guru Maharaj. He was not doing it literally as we would do. He was fulfilling the idea which was there behind this, and that's how he viewed this. In other words, he was not, we sometimes, I should speak about myself, we become little, not so conscious of everything which we are doing. By explaining this, he actually explained how we should be really conscious of everything what we are doing. How we should really invest our heart in what we are doing and be completely conscious of what we are doing and not doing it mechanically. Doing mechanically is you said something and like a robot you're going something and you're doing something and I'm very obedient. No, but conscious means you think about it and you try to do it in the real sense. So that was one thing which I wanted to say. And perhaps one other thing which should be said today, because, one other thing. He made 3 innovations. Every great acharya, he is entitled to bring certain things which are, which may be viewed as not such a, the revolutionary acharya, he has this power to do something which could be viewed by outsiders as breaking the tradition. And many people accused Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura that he didn't follow meticulously the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition to the letter. And definitely he didn't follow it to the letter because he was not the person who would follow something to the letter. He was very alive. He was not a mechanical person. So he did 3 innovations, very important innovations, again, which is very important for us to know because it's also something related to our own life. First, very important revolutionary innovation, which was totally, completely against the customs of that time India, was that he completely disregarded any hereditary rights. Because still at that time, caste system was very strong in India, and people were proud of their Brahminical, Brahminical birth and this and that. So he was completely against it. He was giving Brahmin thread to outcast people. He totally disregarded this. He started the revolution against caste Goswamis and this and that. So that was one of his most important, most prominent revolution. He was a Democrat in this sense. He rebelled against all the hereditary right. And that's actually, but it's not a deviation. It's the essence of Bhakti. Because according to Bhakti philosophy, externals are not important. And hereditary rights is externals. The most important, according to Bhakti, is the condition of your heart. So he introduced this very difficult criteria that you should judge other people not from externals, but from the condition of their heart. And then the next thing, which seems to be completely contradictory to the first thing, is that he reestablished Varnashrama. He started talking about Varnashrama Dharma. He gave this thread. He became a sannyasi himself, which seems to be contradictory to the first thing. But again, he knew that Varnashrama is very important for the practice of Bhakti. The first thing for practice of Bhakti is important not to follow these rigid rules of outdated Varnashrama. But another thing is very important is to establish society on a same basis. Like we're trying here and in other places in ISKCON, we're trying to establish communities based on the same principles, on principles of Sattva Gun. Because otherwise the outside influence of the lower modes of material nature is so strong that we will not be able to resist and we will not be able to practice Bhakti without this. And another very revolutionary thing, which probably is too complex to elaborate on, is that he said that Raganuga Bhakti and Vaidhi Bhakti, which deemed to be two separate paths of practice, spontaneous devotional service and regulated devotional service, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati very strongly insisted that this is not two paths, but one path at different stages of the same path. You start with regulated devotional service, and gradually it will turn into spontaneous devotional service. It's a topic which we should discuss with Tukaram Prabhu, but not now. So it's a very controversial topic. But it's just to say about some of his contribution, how he changed and how he placed the emphasis in our Siddhanta. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't speak any longer. He passed away when he was only 63 years old, and it is said that when he passed away, it was in Calcutta, in his mat in Calcutta. All the watches which were there on the walls of this mat, they stopped at the same time, and they all showed the time of his passing away. Sometimes it happens. It's a rare event, but we are living in a world which is interconnected. So when such a great personality leaves this world, it's noticeable to many people and many entities. So even the watches in his mat, they marked this event. So he was a great hero, and he started this mission of spreading Krishna consciousness abroad. Bhaktivinoda Thakur conceived it, he started it, and he empowered A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to really establish this mission all over the world. The story about this is that after one parikram, when so many hundreds, maybe even thousands of disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada came to one place in Navadvip, in Champahata, and he started saying that my mother, before passing away, he gave me this mission that I should spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And I'm still not successful. But I'm sure that her prediction will come true somehow or other. It will come true one way or another. He was frustrated with attempts. He sent some of his disciples. They were not entirely successful. And then all of a sudden he stopped. He stopped saying, and he was silent, and he was looking in one direction. And Nayanananda Das Babaji, one of his disciples, he describes this, and he said, I tried to see where he was looking at, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and I turned back when Grihastas were there, and I saw that he's looking at Abhay Babu, Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, who later became Srila Prabhupada. He was looking at him, and it was in early 1930s, many years before Srila Prabhupada fulfilled his mission. And he said, but I know that one of my disciples, he will cross the ocean and he will fulfill this mission. So that was his prediction. He was looking at him and saying this. So that's why I started this little talk about him. It's very difficult to talk about such a great personality within a very short time in this format. But I started this talk about him is that it's because of him we're here. And we may feel it, we may not feel it, we may understand it, we may not understand it. But if we really try to think deeply, we will understand how his life and his really amazing dedicated to this mission life contributed to our practice and to our, to our existence as we are now. I don't know how about you, but I can very honestly and clearly say that what I am now is just 100% mercy of all these great personalities. It's their mercy. I have nothing else. I am made of their mercy. Of mercy of my spiritual master, many other Vaishnavas, of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, Sarasvati, Thakura. And on these days of their appearance and disappearances, it's our sacred duty to meditate on them and at least to develop some gratitude within our heart and really try to ask ourselves what we are supposed to do to repay our debt to them. Thank you very much.